Alright, so I wanted to show you some things here about what I'm going to do as far as piecing this in to join these sections of the quarter panel. And I've got my own method of doing this. There's some clamps that you can get that I've looked at for doing butt welds that are commercially available. Problem with them is you have to be able to reach behind the panel and to slip a piece of metal in there and tighten both pieces together. It's kind of awkward when you have a space here and you can't really lean on anything and things are shifting and moving, and so you can't really make your piece up very nicely and then fit it in, and then of course relieve it any place where you feel like you need to relieve it a little bit. Leave a little gap between this panel and your patch panel. So what I've liked to do, what I've done in the past, is I take a piece of 1/8" aluminum and I mark it out. It's about 2 inches larger than the gap, and I'm put a line on it so that I can sight it. I'm going to reach in here and put it on the back side of this panel here, like so. And then I'll drill and I'll cleco it on with these fasteners, with the clecos. And it does a couple of things. It's rigid enough to, right here you can see there's a curve and there's a curve, and I kind of want to bring them both out and flatten them out. Well, when I cleco it to this more rigid piece behind there, it'll give it a little bit more chance that these will create a flatter area where it'll be a better blend. It won't be perfect. There'll probably have to be a little bit of hammering and dollering to take the quarter panel off the car and dolly it out and flatten it out, and then there'll be a little bit of mud work that has to go in there, obviously, but you want to minimize that, of course. The other thing I wanted to show you is a little trick with these. This is a 90 grinder. You can get these for 20 bucks. Real expensive ones are about $150, but they're pretty much the same top gear on all of them, the cheap ones and the expensive ones. And this is nice because you can get in and grind some of the little stuff. These are really expensive. These are about $1.50, and they go in about 2 minutes when you grind it on a car. So, but what this enables me to do is it's a little trick we have come up with at work. And we want to get on the back side. What I'll do is I'll take and I'll drill the center out of this backer and cut this piece off so that I'm able to reverse the larger abrasive pad, and then take a smaller abrasive pad and put it on the right way. And what this does for me is it gives me the ability to get behind here and clean off these 1/8" drill holes that I'm going to be using for the clecos. This removes the little burr on the back side when you drill through, which you wouldn't think was a very important thing, but what it'll do is when I put my backer plate on there, if I cleco it with the burr, it makes the aluminum piece recessed slightly, and it's basically difficult then to put my piece in here and have everything come out flushed up. That little bit of a burr, believe it or not, will stand it back almost a 1/16 of an inch, and it'll cause some issues when I go to fit this piece in here. And you want them to be as flush as possible. Obviously, when you start, you don't want to have it all crooked and up and down and all different wiggles and so forth. So that's just a little trick we've had to come up with at work, just to back grind things that you can't get in. Obviously, I can't get into the grinder and do it the right way. So just for small little things, small areas that you have to be careful. This is these tend to fly off because it's not designed to do this, but it's a neat little trick that we've come up with. But I wanted to put that on film before I got started with this, because I'm not going to be able to film the whole process, so you'll know what happened here later on. There's the aluminum backer plate in place with the clecos holding it flush to the back side of this panel. In addition to holding this the way I want it, it's nice, and I can kind of lean against it now and work my size my piece that has to go in here to mend the two halves together. When I go to weld it, this 1/8" aluminum will act as a heat sink, so that will kind of reduce some of the warping also of going through the process of you know, welding this and tacking it every so often, and then going back and doing it again and then again, and you accumulate a lot of heat, and that'll start to warp the panel up. And like I said, while it won't be perfect, the idea that I have an aluminum backer there to kind of take some of the heat away from the sheet metal will help try and keep it a little bit straighter than it normally would be if you were just doing it out in midair. Okay, when you're working alone, it's always nice to have an assistant, and I use gravity a lot of times as that assistant. You got to think about what would gravity want to do. So while everything else is clecoed together with fasteners, because this is on a back slant, now that I have that backer plate in there, I was able to take the piece of sheet metal that I fitted up to go in between here, and now it's just laying in there without any additional fasteners. And I'll be able to go along and tack it, and then I'll release the piece from behind there, and it'll probably drop out the bottom here. Hopefully it'll drop out the bottom. Maybe not. Now, I talked about the fact that the other fasteners that are commercially available, you have to reach behind there. Now I'm reaching behind there right now to put this on. So you say, well, why don't you use the other fasteners? Well, like I said, a number of reasons. This acts to straighten it, it acts as a heat sink, and it also acts as a nice little bed for me to fit this piece up. You know, I can go back and forth, grind a little bit off, fit it in there, and I don't have to keep resetting my fasteners every time I do that. And it's going to be a little tricky trying to fish this backer piece back over here because I don't have any access with my arm or my hand. So I have another little trick for that, and when I get to that, I'll put that on film too. There's the panel all tacked in. I have to go back and go in between them all and get that solid welded up. But I thought I'd show you what I was referencing before as far as these fasteners that are most people use, and it's not a bad idea. Works pretty good. It maintains a small gap between the panel for welding, and it has a small piece of sheet metal that's attached to a threaded piece, so you can tighten it down, and you have to slip this little piece of metal in behind the two pieces. And you can imagine if you've got, like I have here, if you got just a patch panel, like this is the car and this is the patch panel, I don't imagine this would be very difficult to do. It might work out pretty good. But in this situation where I had to have two joints over here, and I'd have to have a series of these, and I'd have to get in there and I'd have to feed this little piece of metal through this little hole, not drop it, not misalign the panels while I tighten the other side, which of course become increasingly difficult as you got down the line over there. I imagine there's probably a trick for installing these. Guys who use them all the time probably know what that is. And but anyway, I just thought I'd show you this clamp. It's not a bad little idea, but I prefer this method. Alright, so I wanted to get involved with this area over here. You know, I started out patching this together, and this is as far as I got for now, because I wanted to establish this back corner here and start thinking about what I have to do under here, put all this stuff back, and see what kind of connection I've got to make up here. But before I could do that, as with everything else, you got to stop and do something else. Well, there's always an issue with these new cars that have only battery operated mechanisms. There's no manual override. This trunk doesn't have a key operated latch. There's no place to put the key. There's no button you can push like in some of the Toyotas and stuff like that, where you can get up under there and there's some sort of a release that you can do from the outside as long as you have your key fob on you. But most of this stuff, like I said, is all relying on the battery never going dead, which we all know batteries go dead. I haven't figured that one out yet. So I decided to create this mechanism, which I scavenged the hood latch release cable from the donor car that I had early on in this project, the Dodge Magnum, and I put it on. You can see it looks like it's a little long, but obviously this is where the deck lid is going to be all the way out to here, and it'll cover this mechanism. But I had to put this in first because I have to be able to raise and lower this trunk lid while I establish all the beds and everything, and it's a real hassle since I don't have the battery in it and so forth. So I've got to come up with a manual release, and this was my solution. So I made this mount that I welded to the deck lid, because obviously the electrical release travels with the deck lid. And in order to make it serviceable, I ran the cable through and into this side over here. So I had to come up with a way of being able to unbuckle the cable if I should ever need to, and pull this mechanism completely out without making a huge hole here where this handle would have to go through. And so this area here had to be, I had to make this little piece here to grab the cable, and this is drilled and tapped with a 1024, and that clamps the cable, keep the cable from moving. But normally these things, this is, by the way, this is where they have a safety switch here. That's a manual handle that if you get stuck in the trunk, or a kid gets stuck in the trunk, it's a little day glow in the dark handle that they can pull, and that'll operate this mechanism here. You can see what I got going here now. I had to create a little, this is normally a piece of lead that's crimped on here, and it's permanent, it's not meant to come off. But as I said, if I have to do any kind of, pull this off, I can just take this. I've got a little set screw here on a little piece that I made with a tiny little hole going through it, and this little number 6 32 screw right here can be tightened up on the cable, and that allows this to operate manually. And how that'll work down the road is, once this is latched, these cars used to fill gas with this license plate, used to have a spring on it, so it'll be hidden from view, but it'll basically be up underneath. You'll pull the license plate forward a little bit, and you'll be able to reach under there and pop that loose manually. So it'll be a convenience. I mean, if a thief finds it, they can get all your goodies in your trunk, but hopefully they won't know. Hopefully I won't see this video. All right.